Good morning. I know I'm asking this question rhetorically because I know what the answer is, but have you ever been in a life situation in working with someone or a particular set of circumstances where you just get really fed up of feeling like you're just beating your head against the wall and no one's listening, no one's paying attention, things are never going to change, and you're wondering, why the hell do I continue beating myself up like this when nothing's happening? Certainly, I've been in more than a few of those situations. So I thought today we'd look at a particular East Asian Bodhisattva for inspiration and a little bit of help, and maybe we can keep going on a little bit in our life situations. That's the Kshitigarbha Bodhisattva, the earth womb Bodhisattva of the great vow. I want to read from the Sutra of the Past Vows of Earth Store Bodhisattva. If you would put your hands in Hap Chung, please. This is a traditional Mahayana reading. After a certain thing was said, a bodhisattva in the assembly named Samadhi Self-Mastery King said to the Buddha, "World-honored one, what vows has Earth Store Bodhisattva made during so many successive eons that now cause him to receive the world-honored one's special praise? We hope the world-honored one will please tell us about this." Then the world-honored one replied to Samadhi Self-Mastery King, listen attentively, and reflect well on the example I am about to give you. One time, limitless eons ago, a Buddha appeared in the world. That Buddha's lifespan was 60,000 eons. Before he became a monk, he was the king of a small country and was friendly with the king of a neighboring country. Both kings practiced the 10 wholesome deeds and benefited all beings. Because the citizens of those two neighboring countries, however, did many bad things, the two kings made a plan using far-reaching expedients. One king vowed to quickly become a Buddha and then rescue absolutely all the other beings. The other king vowed, I don't want to become a Buddha until I first rescue all those who are suffering for their offenses, enabling to find some peace and finally to reach Bodhi. The Buddha told Bodhisattva Samadhi Self-Mastery King, the king who vowed to quickly become a Buddha is all knowledge accomplished, thus come one. The king who vowed to keep saving beings who are suffering for their offenses rather than become a Buddha is Earth Store Bodhisattva. Here ends the reading. I am, and have been for a number of years, a big fan of Andy Griffith. And even though I've seen most of the black and white episodes probably 10, 15, maybe even 20 times, I still keep watching it. There's some really valuable life lessons that can be learned by watching their interactions back in the 60s. And there was an episode that played the other day, and Opie and his buddies are in the woods, and they're playing Robin Hood and his merry men, and they're just having a ball there running through the woods, and all of a sudden they come upon this transient, this hobo, who's cooking something over a fire there, and he's a pretty rough-looking figure. They're a little bit scared at first, and he said, don't worry, boys, don't worry. I'm just cooking some hobo stew here, some mulligan stew. Come on over and visit with me. So they come over, and he said, what are you guys up to? And they tell him how they're playing Robin Hood and his merry men. And he said, oh, I know all about that story. They said, you do? Tell us about it. Oh, yeah. He said, the sheriff in that story is a bad man. And they said, the sheriff was a bad man? Oh, he said, my dad's a sheriff, and he's not a bad man. The hobo says, oh, no, he was a bad man. And so Robin Hood decided to rob from the rich and give to the poor. And they said, wow, he robbed from the rich to give to the poor? Yeah, and the sheriff was always after him because he was friends with these rich people. That's why he was a bad man. So they're like kind of enamored of all this. And he says, boys, do you mind if I eat some of my mulligan stew? And they said, no, let us go get our lunches. We left them over across the way. So they come back and they decide to share some of their food with him too, because he doesn't have much hobo stew there in the pot. And so every day they kind of meet with this guy and they decide to listen to what the hobo said, how he just doesn't have much food and he's hard on his luck. And they decide one day to steal a ham and steal a turkey and steal an apple pie, steal some fruit from their parents and whatnot. Not seeing it as stealing, but rather giving to this poor man, this poor, sickly hobo. They're doing a good thing, right? And so he tells them this one day. He says, he says, I can't work. He says, I used to work for the railroad. Used to work for the railroad, honey. Used to work for the railroad. And he says, one day I saved a baby by jumping off the train. But he said, I broke my leg. He said, I broke my patula oblongata. And the boy said, wow, your patula oblongata? And he said, yeah. And they said, what's that? And they said, it's a game leg. He said, I got a bum leg now, and I can't use it, so I can't work. So word gets around town that people are missing food, some pretty substantial food. And so Andy calls Opie into the office one day. He says, Opie, do you know anything about, any missing food? And Opie's kind of looking really sheepishly shy, and he says, why, Pa? And he says, because people are missing a ham and a turkey and a fruit and an apple pie and other things. And Opie says, well, yeah, I do, Pa. And he says, well, where'd this food go? So he tells him the story of this hobo who they're helping out. They're taking from the people who have money, like themselves, and giving it to this guy. And the sheriff says, I think I know who that is. That's Wily Willie, who comes into town periodically and has all kinds of crazy stories. So he said, tell you what, gather up your friends and let's go down there. Opie says, no, Pa, you can't go down there. He said, sheriff are bad people, and we don't want him to think you're a bad person. What do you mean sheriffs are bad people? Because the sheriff of Nottingham was a bad man. He said, Opie, get the boys and come on, let's go down there. I'm not going to hurt them. Everything's going to be okay. So they go down there, and they talk to the guy, and Wily Willie says, oh, Sheriff, I told the boys how I broke my patula oblongata, and he said, I can't work. So what does Andy do? He says, well, I tell you what, Wily. He says, I work for the county. They employ me. And I says, the county has a lot of great jobs. And Wiley says, oh, I can't work. I'm injured. He says, well, that's okay. We've got things you can sit at a desk. Oh, no. My leg gets too sore. I can't sit at a desk. And, well, I tell you what, we have jobs where you can work outside, and enjoy the sun and whatnot. Oh, but I can't get down and then get up again. I can't do it. And he says, well, I tell you what, we've got a special room we can keep you in, i.e. the jail. We've got a special room we can keep you in until we find a job that the county will agree to with you. And Wiley's like, oh, well, okay. And so as the sheriff and the boys all start picking up Wiley's things, Wiley just tiptoes and takes running off down the path. And Opie says, Pa, look it. He's not injured. And Andy says, no, he's not, son. And Opie says, well, Pa, does the county really have all those jobs? They don't, do they? And Andy says, I'm not sure. Probably not. But he said, I wanted to try and teach you boys a greater lesson. He said, even though I spoke a mistruth, his truth was even greater. You were stealing all his food from people who need it just as much as Wiley did. Using a lie to try and overcome something, a block, and come to a greater truth. It's called expedient means in Buddhism. And it's one of the things that, especially in Mahayana Buddhism, it's called upaya, U-P-A-Y-A, expedient means. And sometimes you'll see it written down as upaya, kusala. Kusala means a good outcome. So expedient means to reach a good outcome. The Bodhisattva Kshitigarbha, or Jijang Bosal, as we call him, in Korean Buddhism, is one of the most popular bodhisattvas within the context of East Asian Buddhism, along with Samantabhadra, Maitreya, and Avalokiteshvara. Those four are really respected within Korean Buddhism. And I use the model of Kshitigarbha, or Earth Womb Bodhisattva, because of the great vow that he, I'm only using the word he because it ends, Kshitigarbha ends in an A, which is a masculine ending, whereas Manjushri, wisdom, ends in an I, which is a feminine ending. I'm not, please don't read anything into this. This could be man or woman, him or her, them, they, whatever you want to use. So Kshitigarbha Bodhisattva, the Earth Womb Bodhisattva of the Great Vow, made two vows, that he would never become a Buddha, number one, until all beings within the six realms of existence, until all of them are instructed from the death of Shakyamuni until the coming of the future Buddha, Maitreya. Secondly, he made a great vow that he would rescue all beings within all hell realms. And until all of them have been rescued, he will not become a Buddha. Why is he called Earth Womb Bodhisattva, or Earth Store Bodhisattva, or Earth Realm Bodhisattva? Look at the earth, how great it is, how huge it is, how it just takes all kinds of damage and injury to it, and yet it keeps going on. Although certainly we could argue about that, how much longer that's going to keep going, right, with our human interference. But that's the imagery. The earth can take all of this damage, all of this injury, and it doesn't bother it. It just keeps plodding ahead, turning in the cosmos, going around and around and around. How often have we felt like we're pounding our heads against the wall, going around and around and around and around? All too often, and we want to give up. We say, what the hell is it worth it? It's not worth it. I had a client, and some of you have heard this before, and this was, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, who was a drunkard. And for years and years, whenever he would come in, he would be drunk. And it just drove me crazy because he was just an obnoxious drunk. He wasn't a funny drunk. He wasn't a happy drunk. He was just a drunk. And always had something that he wanted to argue about. And I'm like, why? He would leave, and then he'd come back again a few months later. And this went on for year after year after year. And I'm like, why do I do this? Why don't I just tell him to go screw himself? I don't need it. I don't need the aggravation that he causes, not just me, but at other people working with me at the time. He was just an obnoxious man. So he came in with his buddy, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. And they were both drunk. And he had to go to the emergency service the night before. And his dog, a Chow Chow, who was now about 11 years old, his Chow Chow had diabetes. Lo and behold, diabetes. That means giving insulin every day, at least once a day, and possibly twice a day to this dog. And a drunk is going to do that. And he's drunk there arguing with me how there's no way in hell I'm going to give insulin to this dog. It's going to be fine. Just give me something, doc, so it doesn't drink so much water, I'd had it. That was it. I had it. I was tired of beating my head against the wall. I said, your dog is going to die. And I said, that dog is going to die because of your damn drunkenness. I said, I have had it with you, John. I've had it year after year after year. Every time you come in here, you're fucking drunk. And I said, I can't take it anymore. And I said, you're going to kill your dog. Don't tell me how much you love that dog. If you loved it, you'd give up drinking and do what you got to do to save its life. He sat there. I couldn't believe it. He just sat there, silent. He said, I got to go, Doc. So he and his buddy and the dog staggered out of there. You know, the next day, he called me up. And he said, I'm going to make you a promise, Doc. He said, I'm going to quit drinking. I said, we'll see, John. He gave me a couple of days later, he was sober. First time I'd ever seen him sober. He was sober. He had the dog. He had the bottle of insulin I told him that he had to buy. I showed him how to give insulin injections. And do you know, from that day forward, he started going to AA meetings. And then he stopped going, but he was in contact with me and some other people. And from that day forward, he never had a drink again. Now, I got to be honest with you, he was still angry with me. And he was angry for this reason. When he was drunk, he didn't feel any pain. He didn't feel the emotion, all that other stuff. He just was just drunk. When he got sober, all of a sudden, all of his physical ailments came to his feelings. He had all kinds of arthritis. He had liver disease. That goes without saying, being the drinker that he was. He had a bunch of other things, some serious arterial disease. And he said, Doc, I got to tell you something. He said, you being angry at me got me sober. And he said, I appreciate that. But he said, I sure as hell hate all these sicknesses I got now because I'm sober. And I said, you had those sicknesses, John, while you were drunk. You just didn't realize it. And now you realize it. And he gave the dog insulin. Believe it or not, he gave the dog insulin. The dog eventually died. And a couple of years later, John died. At the time, I'll be real honest with you. Even though I was a Buddhist, I didn't know I was using expedient means. I was just pissed. I was just angry with this man. Like, stop, complaining to me about your life and whatnot. Either walk out, leave. I don't need you. I'm tired of beating my head against the wall. And he finally listened to me for whatever reason, because his dog was sick. He listened to me. But as it turned out, it was a good thing. It was expedient means. I had to use something that I typically don't like to use, in other words, anger, to shock him out of where he was at and get him onto another plane. That's what using expedient means, especially in Mahayana Buddhism, means. Sometimes we have to do something that we may not like to do. We might feel that it's kind of wrong to do, but we're looking at a greater good that we're hoping to reach. Listen, if you will, put your hands in Hap Chong to this reading here from the same sutra. The division bodies of Earth Store Bodhisattva, I'm just going to describe this, are all the different ways that Earth Store Bodhisattva can appear in our lives, and all the different way that we can appear to act in everybody else's lives. This is Earth Store Bodhisattva speaking. My division bodies, they take across and liberate all those different kinds of beings in the six worlds. I may appear in a male body. I may appear in a female body. I may appear in the body of a god or a dragon. I may appear in the body of... I may appear as a mountain, a forest, a stream, a spring, a river, a lake, a fountain, maybe even a well, in order to benefit people. I use all these ways to save beings. I may appear in the body of the god Chakra. I may appear in the body of Lord Brahma. I may appear in the body of a wheel-turning king. I may appear in the body of a layperson. I may appear in the body of a national leader. I may appear in the body of a prime minister. I may appear in the body of an official. I may appear in the body of a bhikshu, a bhikshuni, an upasaka, an upasika, in other words, a dharmakari, and so forth, up to the body of a hearer, or an arhat, or a pratyekya Buddha, or a bodhisattva, in order to teach and rescue all beings. It is not that I appear to them only in the body of a Buddha. Reflect on how I have worked and toiled for repeated eons and endured acute suffering to take across and free those stubborn beings who resist being taught and continue to suffer for their offenses. Those not yet subdued undergo retributions according to their karma. Find ways to liberate all beings in this Saha world, from now until the time when Maitreya comes into our world. Help them. Help them escape suffering forever and to encounter Buddhas. End of reading. Thank you.